Thank you. I'm very excited to be here today, and I'd like to commend all of you for enduring to the end this wonderful day of so much powerful information that we've all received. I wish I had been invited to come to you to speak to you today about all the wonderful things that the family does. I just returned from the UN Commission on the Status of Women, where there was a war over the family for 2 weeks at the United Nations in New York. And at that conference, we tried to promote the pro-family positive side of what families can do. And I had the opportunity to present on the 10 ways that the family contributes to the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. I also had the opportunity to speak about the role of the family in protecting women and children, that the family is a protective factor against violence against children and women. But I was not asked to speak about all the positive things that families can do to you today. I was asked to speak about the war on the family. There is a war raging, as you all know, in your countries, and it is really playing out at the United Nations. And what is this battle about? It's really a war over laws related to sexuality, gender, and sex. And it's a war over what we're going to teach to the next generation. What are children going to be taught about these things? In fact, we call this the war on children. You see, those who are against the family, who are trying to destroy the family, know this truth, that if they can get to the rising generation and indoctrinate them in their radical gender and sexual ideologies, they will have the future presidents, the future teachers, the future lawyers, the future policymakers, and so they are after the minds and hearts of our children. And this is a war that's playing out day in, day out at the United Nations. And the number one tool of this sexual revolution that's targeting children is something called comprehensive sexuality education. And that's what I've been asked to talk to you about today. So I ask you to buckle on your seatbelts because we're going to take you through some troubling information, so I'd like to warn you in advance. What is comprehensive sexuality education? It's also known as CSE. We need look no further than this new UN document that came out last year. It's called the International Technical Guidance on Sexuality Education, put out by multiple UN agencies. This is intended to drive the education policies in every country of the world, in all of the ministries of education and education departments. And you will notice that it is backed with the firepower of all these UN agencies, UNAIDS, UNFPA, UNICEF, UN Women, and even the World Health Organization. So what do all these organizations say children should be taught about sex and sexuality? Here's some quotes from this seminal publication. This is how they define abstinence. Understand that abstinence means choosing not to have sex. So far, so good. But it also means, or deciding when to start having sex and with whom. It says CSE, Comprehensive Sexuality Education, promotes the right to choose when and with whom a person, and we're talking about children because this is intended for children, will have any form of intimate or sexual relationship. It asks children to learn to recognize that each person's decision to be sexually active should be respected at all times. Children are taught to respect promiscuity. It asks children to summarize key elements of sexual pleasure, to describe male and female responses to sexual stimulation, and to explain how someone's gender identity may not match their biological sex, confusing children about their gender, their essential roles as male and females in society, and asks them to question the social and cultural norms that impact sexual behavior in society. And finally, they ask children to differentiate between the values that they hold and that their parents or guardians hold about sexuality. If this is not a war on the family, I don't know what is. And again, this is backed by all these powerful UN agencies that are on the ground in countries across the world pushing this agenda. I'm sad to say that UNICEF, the agency charged with protecting the world's children, is behind this agenda. In fact, they published this document which tries to give children sexual rights independent from their parents. And I quote, "States should review and consider allowing children to consent to certain medical treatments and interventions without the permission of a parent, caregiver, or guardian." And what kind of procedures do they want children to consent to? Well, they need to be able to get this kind of education I've been telling you about, guidance on sexual health, contraception, and safe abortion without parental consent. This is a UNICEF publication. And they say for adolescents, the possibility to have access to sexual and reproductive health services without parental consent is a critical dimension of access. They say children have the right to access information and services. Now, the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child is charged with monitoring compliance with the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, a binding treaty. And they interpret that treaty for the whole world, and they have issued a comment number 15 that says, children should have, quote, sexual and reproductive freedom. Children should have confidential counseling without parental or legal guardian consent. And of course, children need the sexual education without the permission of parents to teach them all about the sexual rights that the United Nations is promoting. And the World Health Organization, the organization that sets the health standards for the whole world, they're wrapped up in this agenda as well. They published the standards for sexuality education for children in Europe, and they start at newborn. They start at newborns to 4 years old. They want to teach them how to get sexual pleasure by touching their body parts and confuse them about their gender, inviting them to explore their gender identities. At ages 4 to 6, they want to teach them about same-sex relationships and again to respect different norms regarding sexuality. And this is unconscionable. Children at age 9, they want to send to International Planned Parenthood Federation to learn what their sexual rights are. More on that in a minute. UNFPA, the United Nations Population Fund, they're steeped in this agenda. They hosted a conference saying that this represented all the youth in the world and issued a youth declaration that recognizes that governments must recognize that young people have autonomy over their own bodies, pleasures, and desires. The governments must give access to contraception and abortion, again, without parental consent. Governments must legalize prostitution and same-sex marriage, and of course, provide sexuality education about all these rights. UNAIDS. This is the agency tasked with solving the AIDS pandemic, protecting the world from this deadly virus. What do they say? They have their international guidelines on HIV, AIDS, and human rights. And as a way of fighting AIDS, they say that all nations must legalize abortion, adultery, fornication, prostitution, and same-sex marriage. Many of the very same things that spread AIDS. And of course, children need the sexuality education to teach them about all these sexual rights. So as sexual rights advance, sexual health suffers and is compromised. Yet these things are advanced under the banner of sexual health. In fact, all these UN agencies have come together, especially in Africa. There's a huge focus on Africa and a program called Young People Today, Time to Act Now, working to get comprehensive sexuality education to every African child and sexual and reproductive health services, which is code word for abortion and other services. So we see in our world today that right is being put for wrong and wrong is being put for right. Who is behind this agenda? How did this happen? Why are these people trying to teach these kind of things to our children? Well, we need look no further than International Planned Parenthood Federation, which is the silent partner with all these UN agencies writing most of these manuals that the UN agencies are publishing. They have 65,000 service points in 170 countries. And if they can sexualize your children are going to need contraception, sexual counseling, abortions, testing for HIV/AIDS and other STDs, treatment for HIV/AIDS. There is a lot of money. In fact, Planned Parenthood is also now providing transgender surgeries and, the hormones, okay? They teach children that they have sexual rights and they're entitled to sexual pleasure through their Exclaim publication. And how to experience different forms of sexual pleasure is important for the health and well-being of children. That's their philosophy. So now that I've had to drag you through this negative information, which I hope you find quite shocking, there is some good news. And there's some tools I would like to provide you to help you protect children in your country from this agenda. First of all, we commissioned a report that's being published this month. You can find it at sexedreport.org. And they looked at all of the data and all of the studies that UNESCO and the UN agencies show that that comprehensive sexuality education is effective and abstinence education is not. Well, when we had this independent research arm look at it, they found that there was an 87% failure rate of comprehensive sexuality education worldwide, 89% failure rate in Africa, and many of these programs, 24% of them in Africa, actually increased sexual risk among children. So you can use this study to get this out of your schools and out of your countries. We also have produced a documentary called The War on Children. It's available online at stopcse.org. You can download it, you can distribute it, you can use it. It's been used in multiple countries. In fact, after this was shown on the parliamentary network in Uganda, their country outlawed comprehensive sexuality education and started rooting it out of all of their schools. Okay. We also have it translated in 12 different languages that you can download and again distribute freely on that website at stopcse.org. So I want to say one more thing that this documentary did. As we showed it to many UN diplomats that we work with over a number of years, we finally got the entire African voting bloc to get a firm position against comprehensive sexuality education. And now it's one of the biggest fights at the United Nations, and we get it out of the documents almost every time. So that's another great thing. So please use that documentary. The other great news is families are rising up all around the world. We're the majority. You may not feel that way when you see things in the news, but I see it. I see it across the countries that we gather together at the United Nations. If we rise up and we join together, we can defeat this agenda. And I want to give you another tool. We have a family defense handbook. It's called Stand for the Family. And we'd like to provide it, a free electronic copy to you. It gives you talking points and information on a lot of family issues, including comprehensive sexuality education. And you can get it for free if you sign our petition online. It's the Stand for the Family petition at familywatch.org. If you go to familywatch.org, the slides, just a second, trying to advance it. Oh, there we go. We have a worldwide petition, and if you sign it online, you're basically saying that you support efforts to protect marriage, family, life, religious freedom, and the rights of parents. And then you can become a part of our worldwide army of people across the world working to protect children and the family. I'll end with my family. We have 7 children, and those are 2 of my grandchildren. This is what motivates me to do what I do. I believe this is what motivates you. If you had your family's pictures up here, this is why you're here at this conference. And I'll just end with a song. It had actually been created for the World Congress of Families, the lyrics to this song, and it's a theme song that we use now at Family Watch. And it says, "The family is the beating heart that keeps the nation strong. If families fail, then nations fall, and all that's good is gone. The time has come, the time is now, for everyone to see that if we are to save the world, we must save the family." Thank you.